We live in a consumer society where we are persuaded by an image or a brand rather than a product to fulfill our unconscious desires. These desires cause us to feel a lack in our lives. Our natural instinct is to eliminate this void, and we do so through the acts of consumption. French psychoanalyst and philosopher Jacques Lacan creates the foundation for the reasons behind society's obsession to consume through his theory, the mirror stage. Through the exploration of Lacan's theory and those of Karl Marx and others, we can begin to understand our unconscious need to consume, and how the advertising business is capitalizing in a market that was once controlled by consumers. In Jacques Lacan's theory, the mirror stage, he states the human subject never really exists until he or she becomes aware of itself, and it is through this realization that the construction of the self begins. An infant is not born with this awareness, but rather gains it over a period of time when it develops its motor skills and can begin to seek adventure away from the maternal figure. It is in the primary identification stage that an infant will see their image in a mirror and identify with it, establishing their first understanding of space, position, and distance, and ultimately, this is the creation of their ego. It is in this moment that the child can identify who they are and who they are not, and realize they are in control of their body. They get a first glimpse of how the world views them as their physical self, and compare this to who they think they are and what they've imagined themselves to be. The moment of recognition in a child's life leads it into the world of meaning and fantasy. And it is in this secondary identification stage that a child recognizes how it is similar or different to its mother or father, and identifies with one of them, ultimately creating the rooting lack in their life. It is through this lack that we connect with advertisements, and it is our unconscious desires that motivate us to consume the brands and products in our society in a desperate attempt to subside the lack that screams inside of us. We are driven by our lack to find means of fulfilling it, and in our society today we have turned to the prescription of identifying with objects of desire in hopes that relationship with these objects will form our identity. Karl Marx calls these objects commodities and defines one as an object outside us, a thing which by its properties satisfies humans' wants of some sort or another. The nature of such wants, whether they spring from the stomach or from fancy, makes no difference. Our society today is criticized for focusing on the exchange value of a commodity, its cost, rather than its use value. And it is through these commodities, as Lacan referred to, that we determine our self-image, and self-worth, as we construct our identities around significantly minute objects. This is the formation of the commodity self, as Stuart Ewan calls it, and is through the heavy reliance on commodities such as clothing, cars, and music, that we create who we are. The consumer emerged in the late 19th, early 20th century, when the Industrial Revolution birthed the idea of mass production. It was at this time when the population began to migrate to the cities that advertising emerged. With more of the population living in closer proximities, a greater space was created between the producer and the consumer. Gone were the times where a family would buy wheat directly from their neighbor to make bread. Times were changing, and with mass production, you can now go to the grocery store and purchase bread that had already been made in a factory. Products that were once sold in bulk, like soap and oats, were emerging in packaging with a logo, and here materialized the creation of the brand and the beginning of advertisement. Consuming captivated society, and this made it easy for not only the advertising machines of the market, but also the government to control the public. Individuals have been told when and how much to consume throughout history, whether it was during the Great Depression or World War II. Consumers have been told in order to achieve freedom and quality, we must consume. And even today, we still haven't forgotten that. With consumption on the rise, the commodity found its niche. Advertisements began targeting the lack that society felt in themselves, and the commodity held the promise of fulfillment and improvements that would make them feel adequate. Although advertisements are selling an identity, the consumer is connecting with a false identity, the identity that belongs to the commodity. Every time we consume, we only mask the lack we feel. Consumption becomes a cheap medicine we become addicted to fulfill our emotional needs. But like any other drug, once we come off the high, we are left with greater disappointment than before and a need for more. When desire is produced, there is an intensity in the feeling of lack in us, and it leads us to purchase a product, only to find out the experience we purchased is not fulfilling like we were promised. An example of this would be the character from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Veruca Salt.
Can you spell that for us, please?
Veruca, Veruca Salt.
As soon as my little Veruca told me she had to have one of these golden tickets, I started buying up all the Wonka bars I could lay my hands on. Thousands of them. Hundreds of thousands.
Morning, ladies. From now on, you can stop shelling peanuts and start shelling the wrappers off these chocolate bars instead.
Where's my golden ticket? I want my golden ticket! Daddy, I want another pony.
Society is just like Veruca Salt. Once we get what we desire, we are satisfied only for a moment before the lack returns and we have a desire for another commodity. We don't just get enjoyment through consuming our fantasies, but through desiring them as well. We have a desire for desiring. Our lives are structured around a feeling of lack that forms when we realize we are a separate entity from our maternal figure. And with advertisements targeting society's dissatisfactions, individuals are relieved by the promise of happiness, fun, popularity, and love. The ideal fantasies our egos yearn for are met in advertising and create a temporary state of wholesomeness that we felt in our childhood state. Whether we want to be in their place, wearing their clothes, or be in their circle of friends, we are identifying with objects we desire. Our unconscious mind works by connecting associated images with our wants or what we lack. These images provoke thoughts that stimulate a schema we have cognitively formed, and an associative drift is created, resulting in the need to consume. We live in an oversaturated world of brands, products, and symbols, and as we consume, these goods are emptied of their meaning, and we lose the knowledge of how products are produced, turning the product into what Karl Marx would classify a fetish object. Through this process, consumers become blind to inhumane working conditions and the negative effects of the global production of goods. Some of society is choosing to consume responsibly and share their knowledge with the rest of us through culture jamming. By demanding transparency from the corporations that are dictating how we should be living our lives, maybe we will find the ultimate fulfillment to the ever-growing lack within us.